June 17th, 2003, Dan Stauffer is interviewing Bud Strouse in his home in Columbia City. And Bud, you were in the
Air Force. I enlisted when I was a junior in high school. They had a program that you could enlist in the Air Force as a pilot for pilot training. And so I took a physical and a mental and passed. I went to Indianapolis and passed this exam. And they said that they would call me when I was out of high school and eligible to come on duty. By the time that happened, which was a year and a half later, the war was pretty much over. They had so many pilots, they didn't know what to do with them. And so they sent me a letter saying that I was released from this obligation if I wanted, or if I wanted to, I could come in to the Army and work, not as a pilot, but in the Air Force, which I did. And that led to being stationed in numerous places around the United States, and then sent over into the Pacific, where I sat on a little island for a year. But it was a good experience, and I actually enjoyed it. At the time I was taken in, the procedure was that you were to be in the Army for the duration of the war. But then, after the war was over, why, they pretty much put it to you, if you wanted to get out of the Army, you could. And so after my year and a half of duty, I asked to be released.
Your theory is that once the enemy found out you were enlisted, that
the Japanese surrendered.
They surrendered.
Yes. They say, well, and the atomic bomb might have had something to do with it.
And your battalion or regiment, division, what would you have been?
It was just the Air Force. I don't know whether we had a specific.
Okay.
I started out, of course, as a private, and by being on duty long enough, I advanced to being a sergeant.
Okay.
But we were considered a part of the United States Army Air Force.
Okay. Okay. You would have enlisted when? What year would that have been, do you suppose?
1944 was when I first signed up, and then I graduated in 1945 from high school, and then it was only it was in the middle of the summer then that I was called for duty.
Okay. So you'd have been 18 or?
Yes.
Roughly?
Yeah. Yes. Just had turned 18.
Okay. And then, I won't skip too far ahead here, but
A lot of this I don't remember.
your 1944 is when you enlisted, and then you were in that service, and then you were in the Korean conflict for a while. When would you have been done with that, or when would you?
Well, to say, we just went out to this little island,
okay,
and just sat there. We really were.
Okay, Bud. So you were in the World War II, and then.
Yes, then I came home actually.
47.
But I had when they discharged us the first time, there were papers to fill out, and I think one of the papers said, something to the effect, "Can we keep your name for on-call duty if necessary or needed?" And I said yes.
Okay.
Knowing what I was doing.
All right.
Again, that's my recollection of it.
So
Okay.
it was in 1950 that you were recalled for the Korean War, because that's when we were dating.
Yes, okay, yes, first was.
And it
Okay.
was gone a year,
Okay. So like 1951, you would have been discharged.
because the war was over.
Yeah,
Okay.
they heard I was enlisted.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Okay. So, where was your basic training at?
in Biloxi, Mississippi was the first. See, at this time, the whole thing was such a mess they had. I was in Denver, I was in Texas. They didn't know what to do with us. And the troops were coming home from the Pacific War, and they had all the bozos like me that they were trying to send out there to take over, and it was a mess, it really was. And so we were just sort of scattered around.
Okay, and then this island that you were stationed on?
Johnson Island.
Johnson Island.
Yeah. Which is still there. And it's,
Didn't they use that for a
they
A-bomb test?
yeah, they done them, and they had a lot of
And
the chemicals stored there that were dangerous and started leaking, and it's just a little teeny tiny thing. I think it was about a mile long and a half mile. It was a refueling base actually for the planes that were flying from California over to, well, actually to Hawaii. And so we were kind of.
Did you have any injuries?
No.
No.
I think I sprained my ankle once. No, nothing war related, nothing.
Medals or special service awards?
No, they give you things.
Yeah.
we tried to get his medals once, and all his service records burned up. And
Yeah, all that stuff was up someplace in Michigan.
I think it was
I
Kansas.
thought it was in Michigan, and the place burned down, and so they really lost most of it.
A lot of servicemen's records were burned.
Wow.
Destroyed.
Tell them about your sighting trip that Holly keeps writing to you about.
What trip?
Well,
Oh, well, when we were on this little island, they had a very old airplane. I don't know, it was a two-propeller, I don't know what kind of plane it was. And periodically they would load some of the troops on and take us back to Hawaii for a little rest and relaxation. And they had taken us over and they were flying us back to the island, and they couldn't find it. And they were, what they do then, they start going up and down, and they have somebody trying to track them with radar so they can say, pick out where this airplane is. They're going up and down, I'm getting sick.
you were out of fuel.
Well, yeah, and they were running out of fuel, but I don't know, their navigational things weren't working, and so they couldn't find the island.
Oh, man.
But they did, but I was so sick I didn't care. I was kind of hoping we'd crash and I could get in the lifeboat and float for a while, but they did find the island, and I'd forgotten about that.
So, when you enlisted, you were in high school.
I was in high school.
Where were you living then?
On South Elm Street.
In Columbia City?
Yeah, in Columbia City, yeah.
And did any of your friends go in at the same time?
Yeah, Charlie.
Charlie Travelby.
Charlie
Was the other guy in that article? Wasn't he? But I knew Charlie was the only one who was your real friend.
Yeah, but I didn't stay with them. We got on the train and went, I don't know, where Shepherd Field, and then that was the last I saw them.
Did you keep in touch with any of your people that you were stationed with?
Well, yeah, at the class reunion. That was, who was that? That Charlie?
Well, Charlie was at the class reunion.
Yeah,
But the one, his army buddy that he stays in touch with is this Holiday Obrecht from
lives in Baltimore
area. And we as a family are friends with them, and they have 2 children, who are of course adults now, but we have visited back and forth ever since they were little children, you know, ever since we've been married. We're still friends. In fact, I think they're coming this fall.
So anyhow, it was, like I say, there were, I think, 8 million. And that may be way, I don't know why I have that figure in mind. military people in the world having some experiences or no experiences, and being shuttled around the world trying to... The Army is probably the most inefficient operation in the world. It really is. You have generals and officers that don't know what they're doing, and it's not a good thing.
Were you married at the time?
No. Was I married? Did you go with? No, I was not. I was...
No, we had just started dating when he had to go back to Korea, or for the Korean conflict.
Did I? Who did I date? This is 60 years ago.
Yeah. And what did your parents think when you decided to enlist? Were they...
I don't remember that they tried to talk me out of it, or was my father was kind of proud that I was, and those days it was either enlist or be drafted anyhow, and I didn't want to particularly be drafted and get shot at. So...
But you see, they couldn't have found him on Johnson Island. The people on Johnson Island couldn't even find Johnson Island.
Yeah, Johnson Island. It's still there, and I don't know what they're doing with it now. But every once in a while you read about Johnson Island.
Boot camp, what was that like?
Easy, not, they marched you and drilled you and gave you orientation, but it usually was done by people that weren't too capable, and we weren't too interested. But they did, when they had regular, we had a rifle range and we did shots. I remember once I shot at the wrong target. The guy whose target I was hitting got a really good grade. Most of my bullets went in his target. But so we did the usual soldier things, and we marched and we drilled. And
do you remember any of your instructors or your boot camp?
I really
stick
don't.
out?
No.
Okay.
Usually, no, I really don't.
Remember what it felt like when you landed on Johnson Island? And
this was all very exciting, You're getting an airplane and fly to, first it was Hawaii, and then they flew us to Johnson Island.
And at that time, people weren't making long flights like that, and it was
They were
really an
anxious to
unusual
get us.
thing.
Then when we came home on a ship, and I was never so sick in my life. Thought I was going to die. I wanted to die, in fact. They took us back to Hawaii, but put us on an old boat that just bounced and rolled. That was bad.
how long of a trip was that?
Probably 6 or 7 days, probably. I don't know, I was unconscious most of the time. I just went up on the deck where the air was a little fresher. And that's what's done when we first started out on that. Sure, you don't need to put this, but we were along the railing, watching the boat and the waves, and some guy upwind from me vomited, and it blew down on me.
Which set off the...
Yeah, and I never felt well for the day from that time on. But yeah, he threw up and the wind carried it back and all over me. Oh, so that was fun. Yeah, I forgot all these little fun things. What did you do in the war, Daddy? Well, I got puked on.
Did you have a particular job assignment?
No, actually, yes, I was a clerk typist, was what I was supposed to do, and I went through a schooling where they taught us to type, and so for a while.
What did you do on Johnson Island? Were you a clerk typist there, or did you fuel airplanes, or what?
Yeah, but it was more like, it was 24-hour day duty, and you would go and sit at a desk, and if messages came in, they had a teletype system that we would get messages, and if they were important, we would relay them on to somebody or wad them up and throw them away. I don't know how we won the war.
Any casualties and people that you were serving with?
No, the war was over, actually.
Okay.
As I say, by the time we got overseas, no one was shooting at us.
So you probably weren't a POW.
No.
No.
But
Let's see.
he said there was a Japanese submarine that came up and tried to shoot at the island, but they never hit it, and I don't know.
Somebody spotted, or?
Yeah, I don't know whether the submarine was still fighting the war after it was over, because when I was, but yes, that was the one.
Did you stay in touch with your family through that? Were you able to get letters out and?
Yeah, they were pretty good about that. We could write letters, and they had airplane transportation from the island going back to Hawaii, and then somehow they'd get to California, and then they'd get to Columbia City. So I didn't write very much.
But his mother wrote to him.
The food, how was the food?
Okay. It was adequate. They had a lot of canned GI stuff that we ate some, but mostly we had mess halls that we'd go to, and it was decent. It was satisfactory.
Let's see. What'd you guys do for entertainment there?
Nothing. Really. Well, of course, it was a tropical island. We went swimming and sunbathing. They had movies. They had a little theater on the island, and they would have some bad movies. Every once in a while, a USO group would come, and they're always pretty awful, but we'd go. We had a little arena theater thing, or else we'd be outside. And so they put on some shows. So there was entertainment.
No big name entertainers?
No, not Johnson. No, not that I remember. And they had a little library. There were books to read. Play with the booty birds.
Any pranks that you can remember pulling or being pulled on you, or?
No.
Nothing.
No, really.
Pretty serious.
Well, yeah. There really wasn't anything that I remember. Of course, back then, we were 18 years old, and being silly and wild and crazy most of the time anyhow. It was kind of fun. I enjoyed it.
Well, when you got out, what did you do right away?
Home. I guess they took us back and stayed on the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Where did you land?
in California, somewhere. Of course, I remember, the boat was, and I was really deathly sick. And suddenly I realized the boat's not bouncing up and down, and we were coming under the Golden Gate Bridge going into the bay. That was nice.
Then did you take the train back to
Yes.
Indiana?
Mm-hmm.
And right after that, what did you do after you were out of the service, what did you?
I went to work in my daddy's store.
Well, he went down and looked at Wabash College, because his mother
No,
wanted
well,
Wabash College.
yeah, my
And he
mom
went down and they
went to
had
college.
Quonset huts down there for the students. He said he'd had enough of those for a while, thank you. He didn't want to
Well,
do that.
I I think I had to take a mental test and couldn't pass it anyhow.
I see.
So I never did go to college.
And that job lasted quite a while?
My being in the service?
No, the Strouse's.
Oh, yes,
Strouse.
that was, yes, about 105 years that store was there. I finally made it go belly up, and that was the end of the Strouse retail store in Columbia City.
Okay. Do you ever do anything with any veterans organizations, or?
No.
Not really.
You were a member of the American Legion.
Oh, yeah. But I don't think I went more than 5 or 6 times.
Well, and you did that mainly because Uncle Abe was the head of the Legion here.
Yeah,
Of course, Buck had to be in there, so.
they drank beer and stuff. That was something every Sunday when we were on the island. They had a beer party. They'd have free beer and hamburger. They called it hamburger. I'd forgotten about that. So
that might have been your most favorite part of the.
Well, yeah, it was. They had all the cold beer, where it came from, and what kind of beer it was. We had all the beer we wanted, and somebody was cooking hamburgers. It tasted good, but I'm not sure what the meat was or where it came from. My life was simpler then. Yeah, I forgot every Sunday there was parties on Johnson Island.
Okay. Was there anything else you'd like to throw in here or
No.
interject?
If I was young enough, I'd re-enlist and do it all. No, I wouldn't. No, you've been very kind and.
Okay. Well, thank you for.
It's been my pleasure.
Okay.